before we, before I let these ladies mention about my father and how he mentored them, I'd just like to say a little bit about him and his life. He studied at King's College, London University, quite close by, and I happened to be taken there just, I think it was yesterday or the day before, with Tayyab Shah, who's I think here present from King's College, and it was the first time I was seeing the college where my father studied. So from law, he practiced law in Lahore, got a little disillusioned with law, and India had just got independence then, and they were looking for fresh people to join the diplomatic service, and he took the exam and was selected, and went to London on his first posting. So England became very much a part of his life, education, and his work for 3 years in the Indian High Commission. So he imbibed a lot of British values, admiration for British democracy, so it's a little quite appropriate that this Litfest is taking place in London, and it's really a kind of pop-up festival, half a day, but anyway, I think much of what my father admired and liked about England will come out in this festival, in this half a day that we've got here. Let me just say a few things about him. We've had 6 Litfests in Kasauli now, called Khushwant Singh Literary Fest, and they have mirrored some of his passions and his concerns, like the environment and the ecology of Kasauli, preserving the environment and the ecology of Kasauli. Then the education of the girl child, that's another great concern of his. Then the importance of humor. I'll mention a little bit about that later. So humor was very much part of his upbringing, his ethos, his writings. Then he was very much concerned about improving Indo-Pakistan ties. He was born in what is now Pakistan, in a village called Hadali, and he always had a great fondness for Pakistan. Whenever any Pakistani came to meet him, he would immediately open his doors to them. So furthering Indo-Pak ties was one of his great passions. He loved Urdu poetry as well. But before I pass it on to the ladies here, I just thought I would quote from 2 of his works, which are humorous, but there's always a serious content to what he said. One is on why he is in. The first I'll say is on his mother tongue, on my mother tongue. So here he goes in his typical, rather kind of contentious and infuriating to some people. When anyone asks me, what is your mother tongue? I reply without hesitation, English. They regard my swarthy complexion, the turban on my head, and my graying beard. The contemptuous look in their eyes leaves me no doubt that they see me as a leftover of the breed of toadying spittle lickers of the British. When I add, my mother tongue is English, though my mother cannot speak a word of it, they roar with laughter. They think it is a big joke. How can a black man born in India, deriving the sustenance from the dung heap of a Punjabi village, describe English as his mother tongue, except in jest? I do not jest. I call English my mother tongue because I am more familiar with it than with any other language. since most people I mix with are also more at ease with English than what they call their mother tongue, I hear more English spoken than any other language. All my work is done in English. I write it better than my 3 Indian languages, Punjabi, Hindi and Urdu. I know that in writing English I make errors in grammar and my vocabulary is limited. I try to better my diction, improve my syntax and endeavor to turn out a polished sentence which is at once pregnant with meaning and pleasing to the ear. With me, English is a passion. No other language gives me quite the same pleasure. I find it more musical and much richer in its literature than any other language of the world. When I make these assertions, my friends shake their heads, cluck their tongues and remark, even if all you say about English is true, it still does not make it your mother tongue. I bark back, so much the worse for definitions. If a person cannot speak the language spoken by his mother, not an inconceivable situation, for example, children of Indian parents in England or even children in westernized Bombay in India, it is a travesty of fact to describe that language as a mother tongue. Let us redefine it as a language one is most at home with and which one loves. So defined, Jawaharlal Nehru's mother tongue was English. His daughter Indira Gandhi's mother tongue is also English and is also mine. Now another short, there's humor in it, but there's also a serious content. And of course it angers a lot of people, but he speaks from his heart always. Now this is another one of why am I an Indian? Why am I an Indian? I did not have any choice. I was born one. If the good Lord had consulted me on the subject, I might have chosen a country more affluent, less crowded, less censorious in matters of food and drink, unconcerned with personal equations, and free of religious bigotry. Am I proud of being an Indian? I can't really answer this one. I can scarcely take credit for the achievements of my forefathers, and have little to be proud of what we are doing today. On balance, I would say, no, I'm not proud of being an Indian. Why don't you get out and settle in some other country? Once again, I have very little choice. All the countries I might like to live in have restricted quotas for immigrants. Most of them are white and have a prejudice against colored people. In any case, I feel more relaxed and at home in India. I dislike many things in my country, mostly the government. I know the government is not the same thing as the country, but it never stops trying to appear in that garb. This is where I belong, this is where I intend to live and die. Of course, I like going abroad. Living is easier, the wine and food are better, the women are more forthcoming. It's more fun. However, I soon get tired of all those things and want to get back to my dung heap and be among my loud-mouthed, sweaty, smelly countrymen. I am like my kinsmen in Africa, England and elsewhere. My head tells me it is better to live abroad. My belly tells me it is more fulfilling to be in foreign. But my heart tells me, get back to India. Each time I return home and drive through the stench of bare-bottom defectors that line the road from Santa Cruz airport to the city, I ask myself, breathes there the man with soul so dead, who never to himself had said, this is my own, my native land. I can scarcely breathe, but I yell, yea, this is my native land. I don't like it, but I love it. So that is my father. I think it sort of encapsulates his humor, his honesty, and why he was liked by so many people. He, of course, infuriated a lot of people, but he was loved by them, and why he became such a popular columnist that his column was read by tens of millions of Indians. So I think I'll leave it at that and now hand it over to who would like to start first. Imtiaz?
Yes.
Okay.
Rahul, for that and for inviting us to be here. It's a great honor to be asked to speak in relation to Khushwant Singh, who was the first editor who ever published me when I was completely unknown. So that's why all I really have to say today is this poem that I've written for him. Not a nice man to know. Acid-tongued mischief maker, spotlight stealer, story stalker, salt in the wound piss taker, punchline grabbing headline hogger. Not nice. Not a nice man to know. Spit in the eye, straight talker, shaker upper, elbow in the ribs, ego breaker, bawdy, shameless gossip monger, whiskey guzzling guzzle lover. Not nice. Of all the Sikhs, he was sicker, pricker of pride, poker and pecker away at the accepted order, sparing neither man nor God. Not nice at all. Not a nice man to know. Half his heart in Lahore, half in Amritsar, 1 foot in Delhi, 1 in the gutter, son of a gun and sarsoba sing, malice towards one and all. If you're not expected, don't ring his bell. If you expect to be respected, go to hell. Not a nice man to know. I know. But I wish that I had known him longer. And I wish there were more like him in the world. Not nice to know. But they don't grow on trees, people like him. So it's worth remembering Khushwant Singh. Not nice, but he took us all under his wing. The young, the outspoken, the runaways, the rebels and poets, the broken things. And this is why we gather to sing of him. While he is laughing up there, in the place he didn't believe in, drinking a peg or 3 with the boss, who's still not the boss of him. So here's to the man who we know is not nice to know, but we want to know and go on knowing. Khushwant, Khushwant, Khushwant Singh.
Thank you. And again, thank you very much to Rahul and Neelima for inviting me to this. I was sort of expecting a slightly Ghurelu festival of just family and friends. And downstairs it felt a little bit like that in the dining room when we were having our sandwiches, except of course for the presence of Khushwant, who fireside wit and all of that. I remember him with Peter on the Mura in the corner of his room. It felt a little bit like we were back in Sajjan Singh Park downstairs. So, it's some absolutely wonderful memories. I first met Khushwant in the year 2000. My debut novel had just been published by Penguin in the UK, and my husband and I decided to use the chance to go back to India and live there for a while. Took our daughter with us. Khushwant had, I'm still eternally grateful to a woman called Sheila Reddy, who was the literary editor of Outlook magazine, who apparently pressed a copy of this debut novel of mine into Khushwant's hands and told him to read it. Khushwant read the book, read a little bit, obviously read out a little bit about me or asked around. He always had his journalist ear close to the ground. He figured out that I was now living in Delhi. I'd only just moved back. When I received this letter with my name in this kind of spiky scrawl on the envelope, one that I was to become very familiar with actually, because he continued to correspond with me even when I moved back to England a few years down the line. Khushwant wrote a letter to tell me that he had reviewed my novel, he read it and enjoyed it, and all of this was absolutely incredible to me because this was a sort of very small confessional story of an 18-year-old girl who loses her first love to an arranged marriage. And for someone of Khushwant's journalistic stature, it seemed to me absolutely marvelous that he would have taken the trouble to read a book like that and enjoy it and even bothered to review it. And sure enough, the review appeared in, well, all over the place thanks to his variously syndicated columns. So he wrote me a letter to tell me that the review was about to appear, and I read the review in a day or two after that. And in the letter he said, here's my number, it would be very nice to meet, come around one day, bring your husband, bring your daughter. He was like that, very inclusive. Telephone numbers and the address was there on the top of the letter. So with much trepidation I picked up the phone, having read the review, and called Khushwant, and had this was the days before he had lost his hearing, so we could still have a reasonably good conversation on the telephone. He was friendly and warm and welcoming and said, let's fix a date right away. And a date was fixed for me to go around to his house. And he said, and I will call a few other people as well if you're happy to meet some of Delhi's literati. A friend said to me, Delhi's literati, they're going to chew you up, spit you out alive. They're reputed to have these long, sharp knives. But I didn't know really who I was to expect, but we trotted along. Before hanging up, Khushwant did say, don't be late. And obviously that's the kind of thing you would expect that someone would just work, that people would use to terminate a telephone conversation. And anyone familiar with Delhi's wonderful traffic will know that inevitably you are late. And there I was cutting through the traffic from South Delhi to get across to Sujan Singh Park. And we were it must have been about 7:30. He'd said 7 o'clock, it was about 7:30. We were pulling into the car park. I still wasn't worried because, I thought, well, fashionably late, half an hour's all right. I can already see a few faces, few smiling faces, because other people would be familiar with the rules of Khushwant's hospitality. And we sort of floated into the house feeling reasonably happy. This was my husband and myself. And we were greeted at the door by this really rather curmudgeonly presence. There's no other way to describe this diminutive and rather grouchy person who greeted me at the door with the words, "You're late." And that was a bit alarming to someone who, I was meeting him for the very first time, didn't really know what to expect. But he probably realized that I knew no one else who knew him and who would have warned me of the consequences. So he melted soon enough and said, okay, come on in quick, meet everybody. And it's still a bit of a blur to me because it was all so quick. It all sort of finished off before I knew it, but I think I met Sheila Reddy, and Kishwar was probably there, Tableen Singh, Humra Qureshi. This was Delhi's literati. Biggest surprise of all was V.S. Naipaul and his wife. But I must have exchanged something like 2 or 3 words with each person, because as Khushwant had said, if people, this was how he had greeted me at the door, that people come here normally at 7 o'clock, and if they're not gone, they come on time, because if they're not gone by 8 o'clock, I tell them to fuck off. Sure enough, about 15 minutes after we'd arrived and been introduced around and had a few snatched conversations, we had all duly, that's Sir Vidya and Lady Naipaul and everybody, effed off. And there we were standing outside Khushwant's house and catching up a little bit on the last bits of conversation in the square in the car park outside. I made it a point to never ever be late for Khushwant again because having met Delhi's literati that evening, I think what I realized that Khushwant, despite the kind of slightly crabby air with which we were seen in and seen out before we knew what was happening, he had actually done me an enormous kindness that evening. And that was, I think, in giving out a signal to Delhi's literati to put those long, sharp knives that I had heard about firmly away. I was ensconced under that wing. And that was a very nice place to be for someone who had a debut novel just out. And believe me, that book couldn't have got a finer set of reviews across Delhi and across India. And I do think, looking back, because I've had some pretty horrendous reviews after that, but I do think it had something to do with Khushwant introducing me to Delhi's literati in the way he did. And I just want to conclude by saying that I told a lot of people about this kindness of Khushwant, the side of him that many people who never met the man probably never knew. But I am very careful when I describe Khushwant's kindness to never, ever use words like avuncular or paternal, because I know how much Khushwant would have hated that. We were at his house actually one evening, it was I think the day before Rakhi, and he was again in a bit of a grouchy frame of mind, and he said, you know, tomorrow all these women are going to turn up with those Rakhis, and believe me, my feelings for them are anything but filial. Khushwant Singh, a very nice man.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Neelima, for giving me this opportunity to be here and sharing with you anecdotes and my memories of Khushwant Singh. I'll begin with a poem that Khushwant Singh had written for the Gymkhana Club newsletter when he was 92 years old. I think even Rahul had forgotten about it. So when my friends heard that I was coming to the London Lit Fest of Khushwant Singh, they said, "You've got to read this poem out." I don't know how many people will remember it. It's called Pickled in Rum. The horse and the mule live for 30 years and know nothing of wine and beer. The goat and sheep at 20 die and never get a taste of Scotch and rye. The cow drinks water by the ton, and at 18 is mostly done without the aid of rum and gin. The cat in milk and water soaks, and then in 12 short years it croaks. The modest, sober, bone-dry hen lays eggs for others, then dies at 10. All animals are strictly dry. They sinless live and swiftly die. But sinful, ginful, rum-soaked men survive for 70 years and 10, and some of them, though very few, stay pickled till they are 92. Khushwant Singh always boasted that he's going to be a centurion, and he passed away just short of that. I met him in the year 2000. I had just finished the manuscript of my first book on my father, Dalmia. And Khushwant and my father had a special, bizarre kind of relationship because he was the editor of Illustrated Weekly when my father was the owner of Times of India. So I remember being a fan and a total, I would say a devotee of Khushwant Singh in my growing up years. So when I finished my manuscript on my father, aptly, my father had died by then, my mother said, "The only person who can do justice to a preface on the book on your father is Khushwant Singh, go and meet him." So I called up and I got this very warm reception from him, and he said, "Yeah, come and meet me," gave me a time. And I arrived very nervously at the Sujant Singh Park flat, in which subsequently I spent at least one day a week with him. He looked at my manuscript and he looked at me, and through his glasses he kind of squinted and he said, "Oh no, another one of those syrupy novels about deifying their father dearest. Is it that? I hate that." So I said, "No, read it and you will know." And contrary to the title, Father Dearest is anything but Father Dearest. It's a very rabble-rousing novel on my father, who, just to give you a little flavor, was he had 6 wives and 18 children, and I'm the 4th child of his 6th wife. His last wife. So anyway, there was a lot of commonality in the kind of, what should I say, rebels my father and Khushwant both were. And Khushwant wrote the preface for my book, which went on, thanks to him, to be a bestseller, in which he wrote that he was a man who broke all the rules of God and men. And I think Khushwant did the same. He broke all the rules of God and men. My book, he very kindly, of course, wrote the preface for it, but he regaled me with many anecdotes when he had met my father. The first time he met him, or maybe not the first, but what he told me was, he said, "I was ushered into this 3-acre Lutyens bungalow in a massage room. Your father was lying on the floor on a mattress, and he had 2 men vigorously rubbing oil on him, unmindful of the drops that were being scattered around. I was also treated to a few." that was my father's morning meeting venue. He broke all protocol. It doesn't matter who it was, viceroy or king or judge or minister or anybody. If he wanted to meet R.K. Dalmia, he had to meet him in his massage room. Then, so of course that he said, and Sethji lay on the floor being massaged by his two masseurs when I was ushered in there. And the second thing which he told me was that my eldest stepbrother, a guy called Dhruv, fell madly in love with Mala, your sister. And obviously it was a one-sided affair, so he bombarded her with truckloads of roses and biscuits and confectionery which came from my father's factory at that time, and he tried his best to woo her. And of course Mala was least interested in this Dalmia boy. And so Khushwant, in his delightful manner, tells me, I came this close to becoming the Sambhi of your father. So he said, luckily the fervor died and the romance was extinguished, and that was the last we heard of Dhruv. The most abiding memory I have of Khushwant is that he was a man larger than life. He worshipped female beauty. He was an ardent devotee of sensuousness. He never shied away from proclaiming that life was meaningless unless it was lived with love and passion. Of course, he often derided me because I'm a teetotaler, saying कि तेरा तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता, तू तो शराब नहीं पीती है, तो इसके लिए सोडा लाओ. He epitomized living on the thrilling edge of being the original agent provocateur. He used to tell me that I love getting hate mail. And Jaishree has already told us that his placard outside his door said, do not ring the bell unless you're invited. But he was not the grouch that he wanted to project himself to be. And neither did he have malice to anyone. I think he just loved the tag of being this not a nice man to know. But deep down inside, he was absolutely adorable. He was a staunch agnostic, fearless and brutally candid. His life reads like an open book, a racy novel that needs no elucidation because he was life itself. A man who wrote his own obituary, I think 40 years before he died. And he was the first one who ever propagated that obituaries should not be only eulogization of the person gone. So if you can call it that, this tribute to him today where we're all just adoring him and adulating him, I think he would have hated it. Although I would never ever, I wrote a very nice piece for him as a tribute when he died, which was carried by the Indian Express. But again, it echoed somewhere in my mind that maybe Khushwant would have liked a bitter hate mail instead. His blatant mockery of death and his devil-may-care attitude of handling all matters pertaining to life warrants only celebration. And his passing away at 99 is no cessation of his omniscience. Khushwant Singh lives on.
Okay, so mine is going to be slightly different. When I came on the panel, Nilofer went whoop whoop, we finally got the sex in. So I have decided I am not going to tell you a story about KS, but rather a story by him. As most of you know, I'm a storyteller. So last year, I desperately missed KS. I was writing my book on the ancient erotic literatures of the East. And the ancient, every time, I have to say, every time I kind of took a little turn on that book, I missed him desperately because I really wished he'd been there to co-author this book for me, because if you've read any of the ancient erotic literatures of the East, the ancient Indians didn't really think of sex as sex. It wasn't just sex. It was so much more. I mean, they thought of sex as a poetic experience. It was sculpted in beautiful metaphors and verse, and it was elegant and it was refined, but it was also full of pleasure. You know, that nerve-tingling, go up through the stratosphere, kind of every nerve ending alive kind of pleasure. And then it was also about down to the ground passion, and it was naughtiness and it was mischief, and
teasing and it was laughter and so on. So there was a lot to it, and very few people get it, and he got it. And I really missed not having him over there. And every time I ran into a roadblock, and I ran into plenty of roadblocks, I'd think, damn, I wish he was here. So, in memory of a man who very inconveniently died when he did, I'd like to tell you a story. Many of you here have probably heard me do some of his stories. My favorite are his stories that he wrote on the Interfaith series, because I think that they're just so spot on. They're so non-PC and they're still so relevant. And I think a favorite generally is the one with the two stray dogs who are on heat, who cause an entire communal riot. Yes, anyway, that's not the one that I'm telling today. I'm telling you a different story, which is actually called The Difference. And it's about an interfaith conference in Paris. So there's the World Congress of Faiths happening in Paris, and India decides to send its sons. They decide to send Haji Hafiz Maulana Abdul Salam Sheikh Sahib, Fakr Millat, the pride of the faithful. Maulana Sahib was a stout, short man with a spectacularly black beard, which he rubbed regularly with perfumed oil. He had thick specs, a testament to his prodigious erudition. And he was righteous of heart. He was one of those men who was, he was, in thought, in word and deed, he was so righteous that not only did he walk the righteous path, but any of his flock who'd ever gone astray had been pulled back onto the righteous path. Maulana Sahib had come on board with a mountain of luggage, which included 2 lotas. The lotas are plastic jugs which one would take with water to go to the toilet to wash oneself after. These are very specially made. They're very specific in design. They have a handle on one side and a little curved spout on the other. And no good Muslim would be without one. And Maulana Sahib had 2. Along with Maulana Sahib, there was Shri Guru Shri Swami Mahaupadhyaya Mahashastri, Shri Vishveshwara Anandaji. He was the beacon of light for the Hindus. He was also stout, and he was also bald, and he had a little body, that little bit of a plait coming down from the base of his skull. But he had spent a lifetime lecturing on how everything that the West had come from ancient India. Everything. Religion, philosophy, mysticism, aeroplanes, motorbikes, cars, trains, everything. So you can see why he was deserving of being a beacon of light for the Hindus. He had also come on with a mountain of luggage, and his luggage included several jerry cans full of Ganga Jal, water from the Ganges, several dalda tins. Dalda tins are the old metal tins full of soil. Soil was when you washed your hands after going to the toilet. That's what you used. You used soil to wash your hands. And he had a lota. But not like the Muslim lota. This was a Hindu lota. Okay? This is not, it does not have a handle, and it does not have a spout. There is nothing Muslim about this lota. This was a Hindu lota. It's a whole different shape. Obviously, that's where all the difference is. That's what it's all about. So much so that Swamiji would not even go to the toilet in the same toilet that Maulana Sahib had used. But they were on the train going from, so the first part of the journey is from Delhi to Bombay by train, and then they go by ship to Paris. Swamiji would actually get off at every station and go to the fields behind the station to relieve himself. He wouldn't even use the same toilet. And then, of course, there was the representative of the Sikhs, KS himself. So the story is actually written in first person. And KS says that he had brought on board with him a pile of glossy magazines with particularly good quality centerfolds, so he could keep himself busy. The journey is eventful and tense, but it was definitely worth it, because when they get to Paris, they get to the symposium, they get to meet this really beautiful young lady. And I have to tell you, she wasn't one of those ladies that you normally see at religious conventions, and she didn't look like a religious lady either. From the way that he eulogizes her attributes, I think she was probably a lady of the night. And she doesn't just, it's not just that they meet her, but she comes forward to meet them. She seeks them out. And she's very, very interested in the fact that there are so many religions. She had no idea that there were so many religions. Now I must tell you that this lady could not speak anything but French. And Maulana Sahib and Swamiji could not speak any French at all. So KS is translating. She's very, very interested that there are so many different religions. And she's very keen to know what is the difference between each religion. She's very keen to understand what makes each religion different. The sons of India are very keen to explain it to her. And so trysts are set up, and I say trysts because on the first evening, Swamiji is out lecturing and he's convinced KS to go and attend his lecture, but Maulana Sahib is free. He's free and he's more than willing to sacrifice his evening to give quality time to this lady who speaks nothing but French and he can't speak any at all, to explain to her what is it that makes Islam different from the other religions. If she will just come to his room, which is on the 6th floor of the hotel, later that evening. On the following evening, it is Maulana Sahib who's lecturing and KS is going to attend his lecture, but Swamiji is free. He's also on the same floor and he's also willing to give up all of his time to explain the difference to this lady. And on the third evening, KS feels that actually he should also, his religion should also get a look in. So the third evening is set aside for him. And he says that the lady came and she went, and she came the next night and she went again. And on the third evening, he's terribly disappointed because she doesn't come, but she sends a note saying, "Ça ne fait rien. Je comprends bien la différence." And I have to say, I was obviously a little bit slow. I read this story when I was very young, and I did not understand the punchline. And I read it again and again for many, many years till I finally got it. But you see what I mean about him getting it when it comes to the idea of the fabulousness and the beauty and so on of sex. But more than that, when I started writing the book last year, my first line was that it was going to be, my work on the Kama Sutra was going to be my secret formula to world peace. Because I think that's what actually removes all the differences. And I really wish he was here to help co-author it. But since he's not.
Since we have a few minutes left for the next session, I thought I would just supplement what they've said. Neelima mentioned the obituary that he wrote on himself. I'll just read it out. His own epitaph. "Here lies one who spared neither man nor God. Waste not your tears on him, he was a sod. Writing nasty things he regarded as great fun. Thank the Lord he is dead, this son of a gun." That's what he wrote on himself. And then I thought I would also mention how, he used to, he never took himself seriously and he loved to make fun of himself. So when he was an editor of the Illustrated Weekly, he would choose the letters which were most critical of him or what he had written and publish those. And he would also, when people came to visit him, he would show them envelope that he had received from someone abroad who obviously didn't like what he had written. And on that address was marked simply, "Khushwant Singh, Bastard, India." And he would, with delight, tell everybody, "Look, it was delivered to me." Which it was. The post office knew who he was, so delivered to him. And then he used to carry these Sikh jokes, The Sikhs love making fun of themselves. So there were always these Santa, Banta and Sikh jokes. And he would carry them at the end of his column, some Sikh joke. And there is an organization in India called the SGPC, which is the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, which is the highest body of the Sikh faith. They are meant to, Now they were obviously upset with these Sikh jokes that my dad used to carry. So they sent him a very stiff, formal letter saying, please desist from carrying these Sikh jokes because you're making fun of your own community. So he sent them a reply back on a postcard. He used to always send things on a postcard. On just a postcard with 3 words there, go to hell. And he never heard from me again. And finally, I'd just like to say, he was an agnostic, didn't believe in God. But he did deep study of all religions. He studied them all. And in his study in Kasauli, there are pictures of 2 of the people he admired most. One was Mother Teresa and the other one was Mahatma Gandhi. He has a picture of Mother Teresa and a letter there written by her to him. He had written a biography, he had written an article on her. He had gone to Calcutta, visited her, interviewed her, met her, and written an article on her for the New York Times. And it was, Mother Teresa always liked the article. And she sent him this letter which ended with the words, I am told you do not believe in God. I send you God's blessings. So I thought I would just end with that and try to,
Thank you so much to our speakers on those lovely tributes. And I know there are other people here in the audience who knew Khushwant well, but I'm going to ask them to say